Hello everyone, friends. This week, tensions in the trade war have eased, but despite that, concerns continue just the same. Investors keep debating among themselves whether to make money or avoid risk. Meanwhile, products like gold, silver, platinum, and palladium keep breaking records. In America, chaos continues both inside the country and abroad, just the same. So, as I said before, Trump claims he has ended the wars and wants a Nobel Prize. But in all the war zones around the world, we see that Trump is always at the center. In other words, all over the world, everywhere, there's a chaotic environment with Trump involved. And of course, in the midst of so much chaos, assets we call safe havens continue to rise. And it's not just in the world. There's chaos happening inside America as well. While the American police were intervening with migrants, one person lost their life, but it was announced that the deceased was a 37-year-old white American. This recent development has further intensified ongoing debates and anger within the United States. In short, unrest within America has grown to a much more significant level. Apart from that, there was a topic we discussed last week. I had mentioned to you about European countries pulling their assets out of America, and now these reports are starting to come to us more clearly. In the past few days, central banks in European countries, institutional investors, individual investors, and economists have been making statements one after another, saying that they are discussing reducing their assets in America. And when we look at their total assets, they actually hold assets worth trillions of dollars. In short, they are currently discussing a tendency to move away from US assets and shift towards safe havens. In the short term, we are also seeing the effects of this reflected in prices. And it's not just these. In addition, debates between Democrats and Republicans in America have also intensified, and a new budget crisis is emerging between them. So the possibility of a government shutdown in America is also on the agenda. This kind of news is supporting assets like gold, silver, platinum, and palladium. In short, we're in a period where trust in governments is declining, and stateless assets are on the rise. Frankly, I believe we should continue to trust these assets without hesitation. All of this news is valuable for us, for investors, and we can clearly see its impact on the markets at the weekly opening. Now, what's the latest situation on the technical analysis side? Let's move on to these. Before we get into that, as always, I kindly ask for your likes and comments for support. I'm counting on your likes and comments to help with the YouTube bots and algorithms. It's honestly not that enjoyable for me to talk about this in every video, but I really do always need your support. First of all, I'd like to show you the dollar index. In this index, we call the dollar index, which shows the value of the US dollar against the currencies of developed countries. We see that the selling continues throughout 2025, and that selling pressure remains strong in 2026 as well. So even if the US Federal Reserve doesn't continue with rate cuts, or even if it keeps rates high, confidence in the US dollar keeps declining. During this period, its biggest rival was gold, because central banks, institutional investors, and individual investors have kept most of their money in gold, and they continue to do so. There's also an exodus from US bonds. I think this flight will continue in the coming period. I've already been talking about my negative outlook on the US stock market for a while, but there were also stocks I was positive about. In fact, I even gave some examples of these stocks. The reason I was positive about these stocks was that due to the Venezuela and Greenland issues, they were likely to see gains. I had talked about these in the YouTube members-only chats. These stocks outperformed the index and showed additional gains. But the index itself didn't show any positivity, or let's say it didn't make investors any money. Overall, in the last month or month and a half, there haven't been any gains in American stocks, but we continue to see upward movements in stocks related to Venezuela and Greenland. In fact, there have even been significant gains. Looking at the index, NASDAQ has entered a region where, according to the indicator, it has started to weaken a bit today. On the weekly chart, we see that the stronger outlook is still continuing. But my concerns are not so much based on technical analysis, but rather on fundamental news flow. That's why you need to be careful when selecting stocks on the American stock market side. The stock examples I mentioned are strong stocks that have managed to hold their ground even when the index was falling, and they continue to do so. But when I look at the overall American stock market, I'm not very optimistic at the moment. Let's move on to gold. When we look at gold, it continues to show a very consistent and high-quality upward trend. The last thing we talked about last week was this. A new trend is starting in gold. For those who said, I didn't buy, I'm not buying, I'll buy when it corrects, I'll buy when it drops, or I'll wait a bit longer, well, too bad for you. We said this trend would continue and show itself quickly, and we actually got to see it happen in just 1 week, didn't we? And when we look at gold today, the area we talked about last week was the $4,550 region. This week, it has moved above that, and now the $4,884 region can be considered the new support level for spot gold. Why is support important for me here? As long as it continues to hold this level, the positive trend will continue in the same way. We can say that a similar situation applies to silver, platinum, and palladium as well. In my opinion, it makes sense to take profits from those that have risen very quickly and move or shift them to others. For example, I thought platinum was lagging behind. I mentioned this to you last week. Platinum has provided a gain of around 20% and is still continuing its upward trend. We'll take a look at that in a bit as well. First, silver. Let me show you the latest situation with silver. In silver, the $98 level has now become a support level. Of course, during this period, it has provided a higher rate of return than gold. Since I took profits at the 50% level in my silver investments and shifted them to gold, I could have made even more from silver. But considering the risk aspect, I personally found it reasonable to increase my holdings in gold. I bought platinum, but I chose not to make any new purchases on the silver side, because I have my own reasons and trends that I follow personally. According to this, last week platinum was a suitable product. Next week, maybe we'll talk about natural gas, maybe we'll talk about copper. These trends change from time to time, but for me, gold will continue to be the main weight in my portfolio, and I want to make that clear. The previous support level for silver was $87. We said that as long as it holds this level, the upward trend won't be broken and it will keep rising. And now we can say that this level has become $98. The thresholds to watch change within just a few days. Maybe next week, for example, the $107 level will have become the new support. From now on, we won't be looking at $98, but rather at levels like $108 or $109. But right now, we can say that the level we're watching is $98. Now, if we look at platinum, for me, there was a very clear start of a trend in platinum. I said here that technically it looks really good. With the breakout here, platinum will enter a zone where it could rise rapidly, potentially by around 30%. And we actually discussed the details of this at length in a YouTube members broadcast. The folks over there already got it. I have also mentioned this in the regular broadcasts, and overall, platinum has already made a 20% increase within this area. That's a pretty good rate of return within a 1-week period. It showed a clear trend breakout. What we talked about in the YouTube members chat was this. It tried this area several times but couldn't break through. Once this area is broken through, it will kick off a strong trend. I also shared my expectation that the movement here would be sharp, since my indicators show the green cloud continuing and there have been a lot of resistance tests. I think these upward moves will continue in these assets. For platinum, the current support level can be tracked at $2,649. A similar situation exists with palladium as well. Actually, I wasn't as positive about palladium as I was about platinum, but palladium also rose by roughly 14%. Even though it didn't rise as much as platinum, it still provided a good rate of return. As you can see, stateless assets continue to attract attention and keep rising. This has actually been the main topic we've been discussing lately. In a period when risk, problems, and chaos are increasing in the world, focusing entirely on this area was a very logical choice, and I think these rises will continue in this environment. But I don't have anything additional to say about palladium. Let me show you the gram gold side. For those following gram gold, the 6,800 Turkish lira levels have now become the current support area. On the Turkish lira side of silver, we can see this support level as 133 TL. By the way, I want to briefly add this. Recently, some followers have mentioned that there have been delays in money transfers. There is no waiting period for internal transfers using UID between OKEXTR and OKEX. Only when you become a member for the first time, there is a 48-hour waiting period after purchasing USDT. Other than that, there is no waiting period. Accordingly, by becoming a member now, you can transfer from OKEXT to OKEX accounts using your UID, which is your username, without any waiting period. Before we wrap things up, let me also show you Borsa Istanbul, and then we'll summarize the topic. As you can see within the short-term trend we've been following in Borsa Istanbul, we talked about the continuation of the upward movement starting from the beginning of 2026. Borsa Istanbul has shown this upward movement in the index. I'm aware that the stocks haven't made enough investors happy. I never claimed there would be a lot of happiness anyway. But for my part, I explained this upward trend very clearly. We discussed it in detail during the YouTube members chat, and we talked about stock examples. So those who want more information on this topic, want to learn more data, or want to clear up their doubts, can join the YouTube members chats and see and evaluate these things with us there. For my part, I am holding on to the positions I have evaluated. I will continue to expect the upward trend in Borsa Istanbul to persist. I expect the Borsa Istanbul index to continue holding the 12,600 level. There is a resistance zone at 14,000 IAD. I will at least expect the upward movement to continue until this resistance zone. To sum up, the same trend we followed last week is still in front of us this week, and additional news has been added to it. There are many issues, such as the internal problems in America, the ongoing external problems in America, the renewed escalation of the crisis between the Democrats and Republicans, and the reemergence of a budget crisis. When we put all these issues together, when we piece the puzzle together, we see that the problems faced by states continue to empower stateless assets. Accordingly, by trusting in these stateless assets, we will lean back and expect further increases. If the market takes a turn in the opposite direction and we need to take more profits and make more sales, we will definitely discuss those as well. But there is an ongoing trend. To achieve greater gains within this trend, we need to continue our journey by taking proportional risks. And I personally expect the upward trend to continue. When it comes to cryptocurrencies, there is no change in Bitcoin. In fact, the product that surprised me the most during this period was Bitcoin. During the rise of stateless assets, I would have expected Bitcoin as a stateless asset itself to show at least a partially upward movement. The fact that it is still below the $90,000 level is a huge disappointment for me. So while all the trends we follow in the American stock market, gold, silver, platinum, palladium, Borsa Istanbul, and so on, continue to yield positive results, we still haven't been able to see these positive outcomes in the cryptocurrency market. Is Bitcoin technically in a compatible high-quality zone? No, it isn't. But based on the main news flow, I thought it should also be accompanying these upward moves. Despite these thoughts, the fact that Bitcoin still hasn't shown this trend, as I said, is a big disappointment for me. Bitcoin's failure to hold above the $90,500 level further weakens its trend. Look, on the weekly chart, the main resistance area is actually at the $101,000 level. In fact, we can now consider this as a range. The $98,500 to $101,000 area is an important resistance zone. We haven't even managed to reach this resistance zone yet. So my expectation was at least for it to reach here, and after a short-term sideways movement to signal its new turn to us. But we still haven't seen these moves in Bitcoin. And in altcoins, nothing has really changed on the charts either. Technically, the area where it could show even more weakness is clearly below the $84,600 level. Below this support level, there's again a large gap and open area. But I have included Bitcoin in my portfolio, and I continue to do so. And I'll keep holding it. I will wait for it to break out of these bottom levels and start moving upward again. I'm sure crypto investors aren't very happy right now, because none of the potential bottom areas managed to break free. Smaller altcoins, apart from coins like Bitcoin, Ethereum, and XRP, have been absolutely crushed. I've especially talked about the importance of staying away from these small altcoins. In fact, a few months ago on Twitter, I very clearly said something like, cut your losses. I said, cut your losses, gradually switch over to the major altcoins, and give yourself some peace of mind. When a clear bull trend comes to altcoins, that's when we'll start talking about the smaller ones. I mention this in my videos. Then you can buy more, increase risks, and so on, as discussed. Many investors also ask, should you sell at a loss? And make similar comments. But I say you need to forget about yesterday and focus on today. You may have taken a loss, but if you're facing even bigger losses, you need to start making the plans and setting the course today that you didn't before. Gradually, by spreading out your risks, you'll move into higher quality altcoins. By that I mean the major altcoins. And wait. What are you going to wait for? For example, you'll wait for the total 3 chart to turn positive. As long as the market cap chart for altcoins, excluding Bitcoin and Ethereum, does not hold above the $920 billion level, we will not have a chance to see the kind of exponential rises in altcoins that we are talking about. This is where the trend begins. Until this trend arrives, I focus more on coins like Bitcoin, Ethereum, and XRP. When this trend comes, I prefer to shift my focus from these to smaller altcoins. Of course, the choices are entirely up to you. I'm just sharing my general thoughts. Other than that, for now, I don't have anything else to add. No matter what the prices are, I hope you're always in good spirits, my friends. See you in the next video. Take care of yourselves. Subscribing to my channel and turning on notifications is an investment advice for yourself, with the intention of informing you about developments before they even happen. See you again soon.